Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bill of Rights Institute's 10th period webinar series. My name is Kirk Higgins and I'm the Senior Manager for Education here at the Institute.
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Gary Coletti, Senior Manager of Programs here at BRI.
And so this year is a special year.
It is.
Not only because it's an election year, but also it's a leap year.
Which is not coincidence. Every leap year is an election year as well as a year for the Summer Olympics.
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
And that means we have an extra day, and so we thought we would spend that extra day chatting about a few things that are interesting to us, often overlooked, and talking about a little bit of what's going on here at the Institute as well.
Absolutely. So it's a small way to use that one extra day a year, every 4 years, to kind of peel back the curtain and invite you into our offices to say hi. So,
So what is Leap Day anyway?
What is Leap Day?
Yeah.
Are you... Okay, we're going to edit this out.
Or maybe not.
Maybe not. What is Leap Day? So you're saying that they literally every...
What is literally every year?
Since AD 45, no, BC, 45 BC,
Oh, interesting.
we have adapted our calendar, in the Julian calendar, to accommodate the rotation of the Earth, around the sun. And it's not exactly 365 days, as you know. A year is 365 and a quarter days. And so to accommodate that, every 4 years we add a day on. So we have a February 29th, according to Julian. Thank you, Julius Caesar, for that.
There you go. So we're kind of sweeping up the little extra bits, which is why we're talking about little extra bits of history.
Little extra bits, exactly. So speaking of history, Kirk, as Senior Manager of Content, we often think of history as being a timeline.
Yeah.
Right? How do you see time when you do what you do?
So it's interesting. I mean, history is a time, right? And often in our classrooms we'll talk about periodization, which is a way that historians make sense of that time, right? So they find a block of years that seems to have a similar theme. They cut it, and then they say, well, this is this period. So the Gilded Age, for example, or the Antebellum, or Jacksonian America. All of these things are periods that historians investigate. But time, of course, doesn't really operate that way. It's more of a measure, which is interesting. I think there's different philosophical ways of approaching time, if we really wanted to get into it.
Well, you know, as someone who likes to talk about philosophical things, we often talk about the idea that time may not be real.
That's true.
I was a big fan of, if you haven't read, John McTaggart wrote in 1908 about the reality of time and really questioned it.
Interesting.
Having to do with whether or not it's, what we've come to think about is whether or not it's a construct of how we understand that measure, like historians, breaking things up, or if it's something real. And his problem had to do with just the nature of reality, right? So he was into metaphysics, and the idea that right now is real, right? We're talking now.
Right.
But when I said that just then, that's gone now, so that's no longer real, right?
Start to question if any of this is real.
Right, nor is anything that will happen is not quite real yet.
Yeah.
Until now, when that is real, but that's gone already.
Yeah.
So since so much of that is not real, all of reality, all of time is really not reality.
Yeah.
Except for right now.
That is an approach.
It is. We call it presentism.
Interesting. Well, it is interesting from a historical point of view to look at time and that measure, whether real or not. I'll leave for others to decide. But the perceptions of time and how time was used and understood actually does have somewhat of an impact on history. So,
sure.
Of course, you think in the late 19th century, early 20th century, there becomes the standardized 5 working days, right? So the invention of the weekend becomes something that is measured, and that's one we probably talk about in our classes a good bit. But what fascinates me is even earlier than that, so in the early industrial period, you start to see these little things appearing called clocks in watches.
Right.
A lot of times we'll think of these on ships, so it's a way to measure your longitude, how far east or west you're going, which opens up the age of exploration. So chronometers, being able to measure with time, what time noon is, allows you to know where you are on the globe, which is interesting. But even more than that, in the everyday experiences of people's lives, they start taking something that is just a day, so I'm going to work for you for the day. That's sun up to sundown. Right. Well, as we move forward and become more industrialized and markets start emerging and these things, it becomes more important to actually measure those individual units of time. So instead of something taking place over a day, it might take place over a few hours, right? you don't necessarily need that when your labor is, whenever your labor is. But as transportation is improving, as the need for these things to happen more readily is occurring, you start to need that more finer measurement. So you see this emerge. One place is in stagecoaches. So
Okay.
in the 1750s and 1760s in England, they started putting minute hands on clocks, because not only would the stage leave at about 2, it would actually leave at 2:30, because they were
Right.
able to have a regular enough stagecoach process where that was actually now accurate. So,
Right.
So it's interesting.
It is. It's a big concept, and one that, when you think about it, seems like they've always been a minute hand, but of course there's not. If you see much older clocks,
Right.
there's no need for
Yeah.
that.
Or if you see a sundial, it's a very rudimentary way of just
Right.
kind of knowing about what time it is.
Right. I'm hearing that quite a lot, the relationship of the sun. And that goes back to, I think, our philosophy of history, right? That is it external or internal, right? Is it our own perception of what is going on? I think we tend to think of time as our own personal understanding of change.
Right.
If nothing changes, does time move? Is a very Platonic idea, as you
Yeah.
know. But then there's that external. Like if I were to meet you for lunch, I would probably need to know roughly what time to
Right.
meet, otherwise you'd be waiting, unless that doesn't matter. I'm sure there was a time where it was around the time that people generally get hungry in the middle of the day, would be when you would be
Yeah.
for lunch.
And yet culturally, we do have an understanding, a tacit understanding. If I say I'm meeting you for lunch, what that would mean, which
Right.
is also another interesting thing to explore a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of time and events happening, we have a couple of guests today.
We do.
Who is our first?
Our first, I believe, is Laura Vilk.
Oh, Laura. You may know Laura from, let's welcome her in here. Come on in, Laura.
Welcome, Laura.
You may know her for lots of different places out there, but if not, for those who may not know,
Yes.
who are you, Laura?
So I'm Laura. I work on our education team here at the Bill Rice Institute, and I primarily oversee all of our teacher opportunities. So that ranges from a lot of things.
Okay.
So Gary and Kirk both end up doing programs that I oversee the logistics for, but then it's also some of the up-and-coming things that we're developing, like our teacher council and one of our newest initiatives, which is going to be a badging initiative. So
Ooh.
that's
Very exciting.
brand new news that will be launching in the fall. And really, I feel like my spot today is just sort of to do a little BRI commercial to let you know that there are 2 opportunities that are coming up very soon.
Oh.
The first is our Summer Institute. So anyone who has attended a one-day program with us or a weekend program with us in the last 3 years is eligible to apply for that program. Gary, you'll be leading that.
Right, you'll see me there, and probably a lot of people.
Probably a lot of folks. What's the topic again, Gary?
For the Summer Institute, it is
Yes.
about justice and the judicial branch. So
Yes.
we're looking at the judicial branch, but also the concept of justice and how it intersperses with the various levels of courts, as well as those who work in the legal system.
Terrific.
So that would be, we'll have about 30 spots available. There are some geographic scholarships available as well, and all of those details can be found on our website. So just go to our website and look up upcoming events. This one is the Summer Institute. And then the next one that we are launching the application for next week, it actually will open on Monday the 16th.
Ah.
That one is our teacher council. And so again, that same group of individuals, if you've been to a BRI program in the last 3 years, an in-person program, we are looking for a group of about 20 individuals with diverse experience, diverse classroom situations to serve on our teacher council. So there will be an application and more details will be coming out soon. But I just wanted to plug both of those opportunities for our teachers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Speaking
really
of
exciting.
speaking of time, these are opportunities that have specific dates and times.
Yeah.
What's the date that starts the Summer Institute?
Sure. Summer Institute will be the July 22nd. Will be the first day of that this year.
That's great. So
And
again,
where's that located?
It'll be here in DC.
in the DC metro area?
Yep, we'll have the program location will be in Alexandria, but Gary and his team are working to plan a number of excursions
Oh, yes,
and
absolutely.
field trips to see the DC sites, along with there's time in the classroom in Alexandria.
Time in the classroom and time in our schedule. So we're going to need a clock with minute hands. Interesting thing about time that I think Laura can help us out with is this, what you're watching now, can we reveal, is actually recorded, right? So we have
That's right.
asynchronous time. It's live for us, but
So
it is out of
recorded
time
for
for
you?
you.
Yeah.
So you, Laura, mentioned
Yes.
a badging system, which is also sort of an asynchronous thing. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So some of you may be familiar with micro-credentialing and badging through your school systems or other professional opportunities that you've been a part of. The Bill of Rights Institute is looking to get into that space, and so in the next 6 months there are a number of folks here and some who are not even yet hired by the Bill of Rights Institute, but we are going to be growing our team so that we can jump into that space. And so it will be a combination program that lives partially in our online programming already, partially in our in-person programs, and then there'll be some self-paced pieces that you'll be able to take advantage of as well. So stay tuned for more details. It's all in development, but I'm very excited about it and just the opportunity that we'll have to reach many more educators with those resources.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, we're so used to events happening at a specific date and time, but this is a way that you can still have these experiences on your own time. I'm like that with television. Do either of you watch television at a different time than something airs?
I hardly ever watch live television.
Yeah, and I never watch live television. I don't even have live television at home, so yes.
Right, so
Except
that...
for sports.
Yeah.
Right, for some...
Sports you have to, I mean...
Why is that?
Why are you watching a sports game after the fact? Like,
Right.
You can figure out the score, you can figure out what happened. But
Right. Other people can tell you about it. But yeah, we definitely live in a world where time is very strange now because we're watching things that have happened, not yet happened.
Well, so we have much more control over time.
Right, exactly.
Right?
That's right.
So, it's
Wonderful.
Yeah, great.
Well, thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
And I'm sure we'll see more of you in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Awesome.
great. Well, that badging program, I think, is going to be really exciting.
Oh, very exciting! Yeah, we're a big part of that. And again, it doesn't replace our other programs. It just sort of enhances that. But it's a really nice opportunity to continuously. I love anything that's self-paced, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do that with a lot. Do you do any self-paced learning yourself?
I do a lot of self-paced learning. Lately, I've been doing Duolingo.
Oh yeah,
the
Duolingo.
language app.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
It's a good way to
catchy.
Good way to pick up. Yeah, good way to pick up. Or to brush up on language skills.
What language are you doing?
That's
Is it
a
English?
tricky question. Well, I'm brushing up on my French.
Okay.
And then I've also decided to dabble in Latin.
Have you really?
Which is
Okay.
which is a strange one to dive into.
No, not at all. I think it's,
But it's
the foundation of so many things that you work on.
It is, yeah, and it's making me better understand how bad my grammar is. So that's been,
When you have to pull it apart and actually think about it, and you have an owl that's generally nice to you.
Yeah, nudges you a little bit.
It reminds you a little bit to stay on target.
Yeah.
Talking about time, having those little notifications are quite useful.
Absolutely. But it's exciting for our Summer Institute too. It's always a really great program. It's great to have teachers from across the country come out and join us and be able to dive into dive in and learn more about, I guess, the judicial branch this year, but also to network with other educators too and see how they're tackling the same questions in their classrooms.
Oh yeah, that's I think among there's a beauty to what you're learning. There's a beauty to exposure to wonderful scholars that you'll be meeting and people at the different areas that you'll go to, like the geographic regions.
Yeah.
But the big takeaway that people often say that they have is that lasting relationships come out of this with teachers from across the country. And so yeah, if you get to be part of that group, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
speaking of wonderful scholars and intellectuals, do we have another guest?
I think we might have one around here somewhere. I believe Tony Williams is here.
Many of you may be familiar with Tony as well. You may have either met him or read something of his. Let's bring him in.
Come
on in. This is everybody.
Guys.
Tony Williams.
Good.
How are you?
Kirk, dabbler of Latin.
That's right. I'm learning quickly that Latin's not something you can dabble in. You're either
Right, you gotta-
all
you
in
gotta commit
or you're
to Latin.
out. So, but it's kind of fun. So,
Right.
but
So for those who may not be familiar with you in person, they may have known you from book jackets and things like this. Let's say hello to the audience and see who are you, Tony?
Hello, everyone. And I am a senior fellow here at the Institute, and so that means that I do a lot of research and a lot of writing on our curricula and various content that we produce, and see a lot of you at the various seminars and Liberty Fund weekends. So we get out there and NCSS and all that. So happy to see all of our teachers.
yeah, absolutely. And Tony found out that we were doing overlooked stories from history today, and he couldn't help but want to be a part of that because
Right.
he knows many of those forgotten stories from history. So, Tony, when we're thinking about sort of overlooked things, or what's immediately coming to mind to you right now?
Yeah, a couple things. One was actually a subject of my book called The Pox and the Covenant, where I talked about a smallpox epidemic in 1721 in colonial Boston, and how that led to the first inoculations being introduced into the colonies. So yeah, it's a really dramatic story because the guiding force behind the inoculations is actually Cotton Mather and the other ministers, and they were opposed by the doctors of Boston and a young Benjamin Franklin and his brother, who started an anti-inoculation newspaper.
Oh, interesting.
If you can believe it, yeah. So the sides didn't normally line up as we might think they did. But Mather is a really interesting figure because he was really a man of science as well as faith. He was a member of the British Royal Society. He had practiced and studied medicine. He studied medicine at Harvard. He had a huge library. He preached about heliocentrism, Copernicanism from the pulpit. So he was a real scientist as well as a man of reason, a man of the Enlightenment, as much as a minister. So So he got the idea of inoculation from a couple sources. One was from the Journal of the British Royal Society. But the other one was from a slave, and because his slave had some marks on his arm, and he said, "Have you had smallpox?" And the slave said, "Well, yes and no." And so Mather didn't know what he meant by that, and he asked him. And he said, "Well, I've had smallpox, but not in the way you normally get it." And so he explained inoculation to this man of the Enlightenment, and Mather very open-mindedly accepted this information and said even that the Africans had knowledge that the people in the West did not have, and he sort of saw that as God's providence, and so introduced inoculation during this outbreak, during this epidemic, and just caused a firestorm of outrage from the doctors and from the populace.
Interesting.
So,
wow. Yeah. What a. I mean, that's a powerful story, and I'm sure one that is very, very timely now, given everything that's going on right now. But but also reminds me too, because I know you've written a lot on Washington. Washington introduced inoculations to his army, did he not, or did he try to do that to try and stifle smallpox in the military during the American Revolution?
Yeah, that's correct, because the Revolutionary Army, the Continental Army, was suffering a great deal of smallpox, and especially during the Siege of Boston. They had a large outbreak, and a lot of the army was down for the count, if you will. And so he subsequently started to introduce inoculations and really actually had a lot of the recruiting centers in the states perform the inoculations there so that they wouldn't even get to the army unless they were inoculated. So had the foresight to do that for military efficiency.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. And definitely a little bit that's been overlooked, I think. So
very overlooked.
Yes.
Speaking of Cotton Mather and overlooked, what happened at the end of Cotton Mather's life? Where have I heard that name before? Was he involved in the Salem witch trials?
Yeah, he was and I think we just did a thing on that, and actually, he played an interesting role in that, and first offered to take some of the girls into his home to pray because he kind of doubted that they were actually practicing witchcraft, and later on, he and the other ministers issued a pamphlet or two. Really questioning the use of spectral evidence and really arguing that the trials were sort of a travesty of justice and should come to an end. And the ministers really largely responsible for pushing the government to end the Salem witch trials.
Right.
So,
just to bring that full circle, because those trials, a lot of that, one of the main days of accusation was February 29th.
Oh.
See? Full circle.
Interesting.
Time is weird.
Well, and speaking of the Salem witch trials, we just released our brand new podcast.
That's true.
Fabric of History, which covers the Salem witch trials.
That's right, our very first episode. So you hear a little more about Cotton Mather there. Leap Day bringing it all together. So you can check that out at fabricofhistory.org if you'd like.
Great. Well, thank you, Tony.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. One of the things I enjoy most about working here at BRI is the ability to have people like Tony and other intellectual writers and others just pop by and have conversations. This is an abbreviated version, but this is not uncommon around the office.
No, it's great. And I always think it's good to be able to explore some of these things without any sort of mandate or need to get to some place, because it really fosters a lot of that curiosity that I think is at the heart of of education, really fostering that curiosity.
Yeah, sometimes finding what seems like one of those extra unknown or lesser known things can often spark a level of interest in getting to what the bigger picture are or what's surrounded that. So
Absolutely.
That's
You
fun.
never know what's going to spark it.
Never
So
know.
hopefully we sparked something for you today, and we appreciate everyone joining us, and we hope you have a great afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time,
whatever
you find
time you're
yourself
watching
actually
this,
watching this.
whether it's on demand or live right now,
Yeah. Terrific.
our present.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks.
All right, bye.